In C Sharp, a constructor is a special method which is used to initialize variables declared in a class. So this constructor have five different types: default constructor, parameterized constructor, static constructor, copy constructor, and private constructor. So let's see these constructors with the help of a project. Let's create a console app. So to understand a constructor, we are going to create a class, public class, my class. Okay. So what is first is default constructor. So what is a default constructor? A default constructor is a parameterless constructor which is a which is without parameters. And so what is a default constructor in C sharp? Okay, so every time when you create an instance of class, you need to declare the constructor of the class. Okay, otherwise if you don't declare that constructor of that class, what C sharp compiler does is that it creates or declared uh, constructor of that class for you. Let's check this with examples. Okay, suppose this class have two variables, int a comma and string s. Okay, we didn't assign values to these variables till now. We only just declared this. Okay, these variables. Now we are going to create class of the object of this constructor, and we have called explicitly called constructor of this class. Okay, but we didn't declared any constructor for this class. So what C sharp compiler does at runtime, it declares a constructor for you and initialize these variables to their default values. Let's check these variables or print these variables. Okay, obj dot a. So we didn't assigned values to these variables, we only declared, and now we are printing these variables. Check now. Okay, 0 is printing and nothing is printing in the case of string, because in the case of string the default value is null, so that's why it is not printing anything. And in the numeric types, for example int type, the default value is 0, so it is printing 0. So how it is printing 0? At runtime, C sharp compiler declared a constructor for you and assigned values to these variables. This constructor is called as default constructor. So this default constructor is also called as parameterless constructor. Why? Okay, this is the default constructor of my class. Okay, this class, it doesn't have any parameters in it. Okay, and at runtime, what C sharp compiler does is that it assigns these variables with their default values like this. It assigns these variables to this default values, to their default values. Okay, this constructor is also called as non-static constructor because it doesn't have any static variables in it, and means this class doesn't have any static variables in it. And what is the drawback of this default constructor? So every time when you create an object of this class, this default constructor is going to get called. Okay, but at runtime, if you didn't assigned these variables to some values, what this constructor does, it assigns these variables with their default values. But the drawback of this constructor is that you cannot assign different values every time when you create an object of or instance of this class. So to remove this drawback or to avoid this drawback, we have another constructor called parameterized constructor. So we can assign these variables at with the help of this parameterized constructor. Okay, int num and string name. Now this constructor taking two parameters. One is of int type and one is of string type. So how we are going to assign these variables with the help of parameterized constructor? There is a keyword called this. This a is equal to num and this s is equal to name. So this dot a is this class variable and this dot s is this string variable. We are assigning this num to this, means this local variable value to this class variable, and this local string value, local variable string value to this class string variable s. Okay, so now we have this default constructor. Also when we create another instance, my class obj1 is equal to new my class. Now check, it is showing two constructor to us. Okay, one is default constructor which does not have any parameters, and second is parameterized constructor which takes two parameters as input. One is of int type and second is of type string. So we are going to pass these parameters and assign these variables with some values. Okay, let's take one as int and name string as name Shubh. Okay, if we are going to print these variables. Okay, check. We have created another instance of this class called obj1 and we are passing some values with the help of parameterized constructor. When we call this means when we run this project, this object, hmm, it is going to get create, and this parameterized constructor is going to be explicitly called, and with the help of this parameterized constructor we are passing those values. These values are going to be get assigned to these class variables s and a. So every instance maintains different values, different memory locations. So this obj has different memory allocation and this obj1 have different memory allocation. In this project and check these values are getting assigned or not with the help of parameterized constructor. Okay, check, a is getting assigned with 1 and s is getting assigned with Shubham. So this is the parameterized constructor. Next is static constructor. So what is static constructor? So if we have any static variable in our class, to initialize that variable, when we create an instance of this class, a static constructor is get created. Okay, for example, we have public static int num, this variable. Okay, so when we create instance of this class, a static constructor is getting created. Okay, when we create instance of this class, to initialize this variable, static variable, a static constructor gets created by the CLR. Okay, so what is the syntax of static constructor? Use a static keyword and name of class. This is the static constructor. Okay, the static constructor in C sharp. Let's check this with Microsoft documentation. Okay, a static constructor doesn't take access modifiers or have parameters. Okay, a class or struct can only have one static constructor. Static constructor cannot be inherited or overloaded. A static constructor cannot be called directly and is only meant to be called by the common language runtime, and it is invoked automatically. Okay, so a static constructor, if we have default constructor, means which gets okay, we have to call that default constructor explicitly, but in the case of static constructor, it doesn't happen. It gets called, the static constructor gets called implicitly, means by CLR, common language runtime. Okay, let's demonstrate that. If we have any static variable in our class, to initialize that static variable, a static constructor gets created. That variable doesn't initialized with the help of common, means default constructor. It we have to declare a static constructor. So if we have common constructor and a static constructor, and if we create the instance of this class, so what happens, we created instance of class with the help of new keyword. Okay, and this is the default constructor. Okay, when we create an instance of this class, we have to explicitly call this constructor, default constructor. So what are we doing now? We are calling, first we are calling this default constructor, but before this default constructor gets executed, this static constructor gets called in the in any class when we create an object of this class or instance of this class, and it doesn't require to be called explicitly. It gets called, this static constructor gets called automatically. Let's check this. Okay, default constructor gets called is called, and same is static constructor. Okay, we have created object of this class. Okay, and we are calling first this constructor, default constructor, but what happens at runtime, this static constructor gets called before the calling of this default constructor. Let's check this. Okay, we take a breakpoint here. Okay, instantly when we create, okay, when we create an object of this class, instantly uh, this constructor gets called. Check. Step into, okay, check. Before calling this constructor, default constructor, our static constructor is called. Okay, so it is not in the user's hand that static constructor to call this static constructor. That's why this point is taken. Okay, a static constructor doesn't take access modifiers or have parameters, and it cannot be, what is it, okay, it cannot be parameterized, or we cannot pass any parameters to the static constructor. The next thing is, when what in what case we can use the static constructor. Okay, so if we have any static variables, public static num int num, we have any static variable in our class, to initialize this static variable we cannot use this default constructor. We have to use, to initialize this variable, we have to use static constructor. Thing is copy constructor. Okay, so what is copy constructor? A copy constructor is used when we want to make an copy of an object. Okay, if suppose we have this, okay, this object of this class, okay, and we want to make another instance of this class, my class obj1 is equal to new my class. Okay, and this for example, take, we have variables. Okay, a variable num, two variables. Okay, public string name, we have two variables, and we pass these variables as parameters to this constructor, int n comma string yes, and we declared these variables with the help of this constructor. Okay, we are passing these values, okay, and initializing these class variables with the help of this parameterized constructor. But now we want to make copy of this object, and we don't want to pass, means we want to copy this parameters, copy these parameters and pass to this another object of this class. So how we can do with the help of this with the help of copy constructor. So what is copy constructor? This is the syntax of copy constructor: public my class and pass this class as parameter. This is the copy constructor syntax. Okay, what we are doing, we are passing this class, okay, this class variable as input to this constructor. This is the copy constructor. Okay, so we have to pass this object obj. This is how we can use copy constructor. So what happens, another, okay, so what happens is that we are not using another memory allocation. We are using the memory one time memory is allocated for this obj. Okay, we allocated memory with the help of this object creation. Okay, and we are not allocating another memory, and we are simply using memory allocated to this object and not wasting, okay, and not wasting another memory allocation. So, and if we have some variables and we want to copy without initializing or without passing, means we want to copy this string and this number. So what we can do, int age and public string first name, we want to initialize these variables without passing another means without passing another string and int, and we want to simply copy this string and this int to these variables. What we can do, age is equal to obj dot age, means obj dot num, and first name is equal to obj dot name. Now check cw first name is obj1 dot first name and age is obj1 dot name age. Print. Check. Okay, with the help of this copy constructor, what we have done, we have copied these parameters without wasting memory allocation or without creating another means another object and assigning it separate memory. allocating its separate memory. We are simply using this object memory allocated to this object, and we are using these variables values to assign these variables with the help of copy constructor. So this is the copy constructor. Private constructor. Okay, so what is a private constructor? Private constructor is used when there is a static variable in our class. When there is a static variable, okay, if we have list if we have static variable in our class, okay, we have static variable in our class, and we don't want to instantiate this class, instantiate, or we don't want to declare any object of this class. In that case, we can declare a private constructor, private my class. So this constructors means this constructor prevents to instantiate this class, means it cannot allow us to instantiate this class. Let's check. Okay, means we cannot make any object of this class. Check my class. Okay, what this is saying, program.myclass.myclass is inaccessible due to its protection level, because we declared a private constructor. So the default constructor is not getting created, and we can assign this variable like this: my class dot num is equal to 100 or anything. We can assign these variables, this static variable. We don't have to create any static. Okay, now we don't have to create any static constructor. We directly assign this variable with this class. Okay,